The morning Sarah Martinez painted the last picket of her backyard fence white, she never imagined it would become the battleground that would define the next 2 years of her life. The fence stood 6 feet tall, perfectly straight, and exactly 3 inches inside her property line. She'd measured it twice with a professional surveyor. After purchasing the modest ranch house in Willowbrook Estates, Sarah had moved to the subdivision seeking peace after her husband's death in Afghanistan. The HOA promised maintain community standards and family-friendly atmosphere, exactly what she needed while raising her 8-year-old daughter Emma alone. The $150 monthly due seemed reasonable for the promise of manicured common areas and neighborhood harmony. For 3 months, life felt normal. Emma made friends at the community playground. Sarah tended her small vegetable garden behind the pristine white fence. She even volunteered for the annual block party, bringing her grandmother's famous tres leches cake. Then Karen Whitfield moved in next door. Karen arrived with a Tesla, designer landscaping crew, and an immediate complaint about Sarah's fence. "It's not regulation height," she announced during their first conversation, standing in her perfectly manicured driveway with arms crossed. "HOA guidelines clearly state 6 feet maximum. Yours is obviously taller. It's exactly 6 feet," Sarah replied, holding up her measuring tape. "I can show you." Karen's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Honey, I'm on the architectural review committee. I think I know HOA rules better than some." "Newcomer." The way she said newcomer dripped with disdain, her eyes lingering on Sarah's second-hand Honda in the driveway. The first violation notice arrived 3 days later. "Fence exceeds maximum height allowance. Immediate correction required or face daily fines of $50. Sarah called the HOA office immediately. Linda Brennan, the community manager, sounded apologetic but firm. Mrs. Whitfield filed the complaint with photographic evidence. The architectural committee voted unanimously. "But I have a survey. You need to attend the next board meeting if you want to dispute it." Second Thursday of the month. That Thursday evening, Sarah sat in the community center's fluorescent-lit meeting room, clutching her surveyor's report. The 5-member HOA board sat behind a folding table like judges. Board President Marcus Chen barely glanced at her documentation. "The committee has reviewed the complaint and upholds the violation," he announced without discussion. "Fence must be lowered to regulation height within 14 days. Sir, with respect, my fence measures exactly 6 feet. I have professional documentation." Karen's voice cut through from the small audience. "Maybe in Mexico they measure differently, but here we follow American standards." The room fell silent. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from rage. She was born in San Antonio. Her family had been in Texas for generations, and her husband died defending this country. Mrs. Whitfield, board Secretary John M. Morrison, said carefully that comment was inappropriate. Karen shrugged. "I'm just saying, property values matter. We all worked hard to live here." Sarah stood slowly. "I'll appeal this decision through proper channels." Outside in the parking lot, her hands shook as she loaded Emma into the car. Through the community center windows, she watched the board members laughing with Karen over coffee and cookies. The appeal was denied. The fines began accumulating daily. After 2 weeks and $700 in penalties, Sarah hired contractor Miguel Santos to lower her fence by 2 inches, an expensive solution. "That solved nothing. This is crazy, Segura," Miguel said, shaking his head. "Your fence was perfect. Just cut it down," Sarah replied, watching Karen water her roses with a smug smile. The day after the fence modification, Sarah found a new violation notice: unpermitted fence alterations. $75 daily fine until architectural committee approves. "Work," she called Linda Brennan again, "but I lowered the fence like you demanded. Mrs. Whitfield says you made modifications without architectural approval. All fence work requires pre-approval and permits. Nobody told me that. I was just following the violation notice." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Martinez. Rules are rules." That evening, Sarah's neighbor Tom Bradley knocked on her door. Tom had lived in Willowbrook for 15 years and usually kept to himself, but his expression was troubled. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," he said quietly, glancing toward Karen's house. "What's happening to you isn't right." "I've seen this before." "What do you mean?" Tom hesitated. "Karen and Marcus, there's something going on. 3 families have been forced out in the past 2 years. Always starts with fence violations or landscaping complaints. Always the same pattern." "What pattern?" "They target people they don't think belong here. Working families, minorities, anyone who doesn't fit their vision. Then the harassment begins until people sell and leave. Sarah felt her world tilting. But this is America. They can if nobody stops them. Tom handed her a business card. This lawyer helped my cousin fight his HOA in Austin. Good luck, Sarah. You're going to need it. The next morning brought a certified letter that made Sarah's blood run cold. The HOA was placing a lien on her property for accumulated violations and unpaid assessments totaling to $1,847. She had 30 days to pay or face foreclosure proceedings, sitting at her kitchen table. Surrounded by bills and legal notices, Sarah realized this was never about offense. This was about power, prejudice, and people who believed they could destroy her family simply because they didn't like who she was. She looked out at her now lowered fence, where Emma was drawing chalk flowers on the sidewalk, oblivious to the storm gathering around them. Sarah Martinez had buried her husband and rebuilt her life once already. She wasn't about to let Karen Whitfield and her corrupt HOA board destroy everything she'd worked to build. The war was just beginning. The law offices of Ramirez and Associates occupied a modest strip mall between a taqueria and a dry cleaner, but attorney David Ramirez's reputation was formidable. Tom Bradley was right. Ramirez specialized in HOA disputes and had a particular talent for exposing corrupt board members. Mrs. Martinez, Ramirez said, reviewing Sarah's stack of documents, this follows a very specific pattern I've seen before. Selective enforcement, manufactured violations, escalating fines. They're trying to force you out. But why me specifically? Ramirez's expression darkened. Because you're not what they consider Willowbrook material. Single mother, Hispanic, surname, modest income. Some HOA boards use violation harassment as a weapon against diversity. The legal fees would strain Sarah's budget, but she had no choice. Her daughter's stability depended on keeping their home. I'll need complete HOA records, Ramirez explained. Board meeting minutes, financial statements, all correspondence. Under Texas Property Code, they're required to provide these within 10 days. The HOA's response was immediate resistance. Linda Brennan claimed records were under review by legal counsel and couldn't be released. When Ramirez filed a formal demand, the HOA hired expensive attorneys from downtown Dallas to fight every request. They're spending more on lawyers than your house is worth, Ramirez observed. That tells me they're hiding something significant. Meanwhile, Karen's harassment escalated. She installed security cameras pointed directly at Sarah's backyard, claiming safety concerns. She filed noise complaints when Emma played outside. She reported Sarah's occasional weekend visitors for excessive guest parking. The HOA responded to each complaint with new fines and violation notices. Sarah's lien balance grew daily while she filed for basic documentation. Mama, why is the mean lady always staring at us? Emma asked one evening, pointing toward Karen's kitchen window where a silhouette lurked behind curtains. Sarah pulled her daughter closer. Some people aren't happy unless they're making others miserable, Mija. But we're not going anywhere. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, John M. Morrison, the board secretary who defended Sarah during Karen's racist comment, appeared at Sarah's door on a rainy Tuesday evening. I can't stay long, Jana said nervously, glancing around, but you need to know what's really happening here. Jana revealed that Marcus Chen and Karen had been manipulating HOA business. For over a year, Chen owned a property management company that secretly charged inflated maintenance contracts to the HOA contracts. He approved as board president. Karen, as architectural committee chair, targeted specific homeowners for violations while ignoring identical issues at properties owned by their friends. There's more, Jana whispered. The Hendersons on Maple Street. The violation campaign against them was planned. Karen wanted their corner lot for her son, so they manufactured violations until the family sold at a loss. Do you have proof? Jana handed Sarah a flash drive. Email chains, meeting recordings I made secretly, financial documents showing the kickbacks. I couldn't stay silent anymore. That night, Sarah and Ramirez reviewed hours of audio recordings that revealed the HOA board's true agenda. In one particularly damning conversation, Karen's voice was clear. These people don't belong here. If we make life difficult enough, they'll sell and move somewhere more appropriate. Marcus Chen's laugh chilled Sarah's blood. The Martinez woman won't last 6 months. Single mothers always break under pressure. But the most shocking revelation came from financial records, showing Chen had been skimming HOA funds for 2 years, using violation fines as cover for the missing money. Sarah's case wasn't just harassment, it was part of a larger embezzlement scheme. "We have them," Ramirez said grimly, "but they won't go down without a fight." He was right. When the HOA received notice of Sarah's lawsuit alleging discrimination and fraud, their response was vicious. They accelerated foreclosure proceedings, claiming Sarah owed over $8,000 in fines and fees. They filed a countersuit alleging property damage and malicious prosecution. Karen's harassment became brazen. She poisoned Sarah's small vegetable garden with herbicide, claiming the plants violated landscaping rules. She reported Emma's bicycle as street clutter. She even called Child Protective Services with anonymous complaints about unsafe living conditions. The CPS visit was devastating. A social worker inspected Sarah's immaculate home while Emma hid in her room, confused and frightened, though the complaint was quickly dismissed. The psychological damage lingered. "They're trying to break you emotionally," Ramirez warned. "Don't give them that satisfaction." Sarah's breaking point came when she discovered Karen had contacted Emma's school, claiming the girl was being raised in an unstable environment and suggesting she might need intervention services. That night, Sarah stood in her backyard looking at her lowered fence, the fence that had started this nightmare. Emma slept peacefully inside, unaware that her mother was planning something that would either save their home or lose everything. Sarah had been a decorated Army medic before marriage and motherhood. She'd saved lives under enemy fire and rebuilt herself after devastating loss. Karen Whitfield and Marcus Chen had picked the wrong fight. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The Dallas County Courthouse buzzed with morning activity as Sarah Martinez walked through security, her attorney David Ramirez beside her carrying boxes of evidence. Across the lobby, Marcus Chen huddled with his legal team from Blackstone, Marks and Associates, a firm that charged $800 per hour to defend wealthy HOA boards. Judge Patricia Hawkins had a reputation for no-nonsense courtroom management and little patience for frivolous disputes. But as she reviewed the case file that morning, her expression grew increasingly stern. This wasn't frivolous, this was systematic harassment masquerading as community standards. "All rise," the bailiff announced as proceedings began. Karen Whitfield sat in the front row behind the HOA's legal team, her designer suit and perfect hair radiating confidence. She'd spent the morning posting on Nextdoor about frivolous lawsuits threatening property values, rallying neighborhood support against Sarah's money grab. Marcus Chen took the stand first, his testimony polished and rehearsed. Under direct examination by HOA attorney Victoria Blackstone, he painted himself as a dedicated volunteer, protecting community standards Mrs. Martinez repeatedly violated. Clearly established architectural guidelines, Chen stated smoothly. The board had no choice but to enforce rules that every homeowner agreed to follow, and the fines were standard procedure. Blackstone prompted, "Absolutely, we treat all violations equally, regardless of the homeowner's background." David Ramirez approached for cross-examination with predatory calm. "Mr. Chen, you stated you treat all violations equally. Are you familiar with the Henderson property at 247 Maple Street?" Chen's confidence flickered. Yes, generally. Their fence measures 6 feet, 2 inches, identical to Mrs. Martinez's original fence. Yet they received no violations. Why is that? I'd have to review the specific circumstances." Ramirez projected a photograph. "This is the Henderson fence. MEASURED last week, 2 inches over your stated limit. Mr. Henderson also serves on the architectural committee with Mrs. Whitfield." "Correct. That has nothing to do with." "Just answer the question, Mr. Chen." "Yes, he's on the committee." The courtroom murmured as Ramirez continued dismantling Chen's credibility. Each question revealed another double standard, another selective enforcement, another friend of the board mysteriously exempt from violations. Then came the financial records. Ramirez displayed spreadsheets showing Chen's property management company billing the HOA $47.00 annually for services that should cost $15,000. "Mr. Chen, did the HOA board vote to approve these contracts?" "Of course." "Did you recuse yourself from those votes due to your financial interest?" Silence stretched uncomfortably. The board was aware of my company's involvement." "That's not what I asked. Did you recuse yourself from voting on contracts that directly benefited you financially?" Chen's lawyer objected, "But the damage was done." The judge's expression had shifted from neutral to skeptical. Karen Whitfield's testimony was even more revealing. Under direct examination, she presented herself as a concerned neighbor protecting property values. But Ramirez had hours of audio recordings that painted a very different picture. Mrs. Whitfield, you testified that violations are reported objectively, correct? Yes, absolutely. I'd like you to listen to this recording from a board meeting 3 months ago. Karen's voice filled the courtroom. These people don't belong here. If we make life difficult enough, they'll sell and move somewhere more appropriate. Karen's face went pale. That's taken out of context. What context makes that statement appropriate? Mrs. Whitfield. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Karen's supporters looked uncomfortable, but the defense had surprises too. Victoria Blackstone called Tom Bradley to the stand, Sarah's helpful neighbor who provided the attorney referral. Mr. Bradley, you encouraged Mrs. Martinez to sue the HOA, correct? Tom looked confused. I suggested she get legal help. Yes. And you provided attorney David Ramirez's contact information? Yes. Are you aware that Mr. Ramirez pays referral fees to individuals who bring him HOA cases? Sarah felt her world tilt. Tom's face flushed red as he stammered denials, but the damage was done. The defense was painting this as a manufactured lawsuit driven by financial incentives. During recess, Sarah confronted Tom in the hallway. Is it true? Did you get paid for referring me? Tom couldn't meet her eyes. Sarah, I didn't know about the referral arrangement when I gave you his card. I found out later. But by then you'd already cast the check. Sarah finished, her voice hollow. The betrayal cut deeper than Karen's harassment. Tom had been her ally, her proof that good neighbors still existed. Now, even that was tainted by money and manipulation. But as proceedings resumed, an unexpected commotion erupted in the hallway. Through the courtroom's glass doors, Sarah watched FBI agents in tactical gear escorting someone in handcuffs. Judge Hawkins called for an extended recess. As news spread quickly through the courthouse corridors, Marcus Chen's property management company had been under federal investigation for HOA embezzlement across 3 counties. The man being arrested wasn't Chen, it was his business partner, caught fleeing the country with $200,000 in stolen HOA funds from multiple communities. As court officers whispered urgently to the judge, Victoria Blackstone's confident expression cracked. She huddled with her client team, cell phones buzzing with frantic calls to downtown partners. Judge Hawkins returned to the bench, her expression thunderous. Ladies and gentlemen, in light of new developments that have come to my attention, this trial is recessed pending further investigation. Sarah watched Marcus Chen's face go gray as federal agents entered the courtroom. Karen Whitfield sat frozen, finally understanding that her petty neighborhood vendetta had become part of something much larger and more dangerous. The courthouse emptied slowly, but Sarah remained in her seat, processing the magnitude of what was unfolding. She thought she was fighting for her fence and her dignity. She'd accidentally uncovered a criminal conspiracy that spanned years and destroyed dozens of families. 3 weeks later, Sarah Martinez sat in the same courtroom, but everything had changed. The federal investigation had torn through Willowbrook Estates like a tornado, exposing layers of corruption that reached far beyond her property line. Marcus Chen sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit. His property management empire collapsed under charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. The FBI had discovered he'd been systematically looting HOA accounts across North Texas, using violation harassment campaigns to cover missing funds. Karen Whitfield avoided criminal charges but faced her own reckoning. Her social media posts and recorded statements had made her the face of discriminatory enforcement practices that violated federal fair housing laws. Judge Hawkins reviewed the settlement agreement with visible satisfaction. Mr. Chen, you understand that by accepting this plea arrangement, you're admitting to embezzling over $400, zero from 11 different HOA communities. Chen's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor, and Mrs. Whitfield, you acknowledge that your enforcement actions constituted illegal discrimination under federal housing statutes? Karen nodded stiffly, her designer confidence replaced by legal terror. David Ramirez had negotiated aggressively. Sarah would receive $175,000 in damages, enough to pay off her mortgage and secure Emma's college fund. The HOA was disbanded and replaced with professional management. All violation fines against targeted families were voided and refunded. But The day's biggest surprise came when the judge addressed the property boundaries. Mrs. Martinez, during title research for this case, your attorney discovered something interesting about your property deed. Sarah straightened, confused. She hadn't heard about any title issues. Your lot, along with 3 others on your street, was never legally incorporated into the HOA boundaries. A surveying error from 1987 left your properties technically outside HOA jurisdiction. The courtroom erupted. Sarah stared at Ramirez, who was grinning like he'd won the lottery. What does that mean? She whispered. It means you were never subject to HOA rules in the first place, Judge Hawkins explained. Every violation, every fine, every harassment campaign was legally meaningless. Karen Whitfield's face turned purple. She'd spent 2 years tormenting a neighbor who was never actually bound by the rules Karen claimed to enforce. Outside the courthouse, reporters from 3 local stations waited for statements. Sarah had become the face of HOA reform advocacy, but she just wanted to go home. To Emma. Double quotes Mrs. Martinez, will you rebuild your fence to the original height? A reporter called out. Sarah paused, considering. Actually, I have a different plan for that fence. That weekend, Sarah hired Miguel Santos, the same contractor who'd been forced to lower her fence for a special project, but instead of raising the pickets back to 6 feet, she did something far more satisfying. She commissioned a mural. The artwork covered the entire backyard fence facing Karen's property. It depicted the scales of justice, the American flag, and at the center a portrait of a woman in military dress holding a small girl's hand, standing proudly in front of a white picket fence. But the mural's most striking feature was in the background, a subtle but unmistakable caricature of a woman with Karen's distinctive hairstyle. A perpetual scowl, depicted as a small, petty figure cowering in the shadow of justice. Is that supposed to be me? Karen demanded when she discovered the mural, storming across both yards to confront Sarah. It's art, Sarah replied calmly, watering her replanted vegetable garden. Freedom of expression. You're familiar with constitutional rights, aren't you? Karen's face cycled through several shades of red. This is harassment. I'll sue you. Good luck, Sarah said, not looking up from her tomatoes. My property, my fence, my artistic choices, and since I was never actually part of your HOA. She shrugged eloquently. The mural became a neighborhood sensation. Families who'd been terrorized by Karen's enforcement campaigns drove by to take selfies. Local news stations featured it in stories about HOA reform. Even the city council passed a resolution supporting artistic expression in residential communities. Emma loved explaining the mural to visitors. That's my mama when she was a soldier. She'd say proudly, pointing to the central figure, and that's the mean lady who tried to steal our house, but mama wouldn't let her. 6 months later, a for sale sign appeared in Karen's front yard. The listing agent mentioned that the seller was motivated to relocate quickly for personal reasons. Sarah never spoke to Karen again, but she did wave cheerfully whenever she spotted her former nemesis loading boxes into a moving truck. On Karen's final day in Willowbrook, Sarah was painting touch-ups on her mural when she heard footsteps on the sidewalk. She turned to find Karen standing there, suitcase in hand, looking smaller and more defeated than Sarah had ever seen her. You won, Karen said quietly. Sarah set down her paintbrush and studied the woman who'd nearly destroyed her family. No, she said finally, we all lost. You lost your dignity, Marcus lost his freedom, and this neighborhood lost its trust. I just kept my home. Karen opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it. She walked away without another word. That evening, Sarah and Emma sat on their back porch, sharing a bowl of ice cream and watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The mural glowed in the golden light, its message of justice and perseverance more vibrant than ever. Mama, Emma said, are you happy the mean lady is gone? Sarah considered the question carefully. I'm happy that you can play in your own backyard without being afraid, she said finally. I'm happy that other families won't have to go through what we did, and I'm happy that we proved something important. What did we prove? Sarah smiled, pulling her daughter closer. That home isn't just about property lines or HOA rules or what your neighbors think of you. Home is about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Home is about protecting the people you love. The mural would remain on Sarah's fence for years to come, a permanent reminder that some battles are worth fighting, and that justice, like good art, can be both beautiful and enduring. In Willowbrook Estates, They still tell the story of the woman who fought back against corruption and won. But Sarah Martinez knows the real victory wasn't in the courtroom or the settlement check. The real victory was teaching her daughter that in America, everyone deserves to stand proud on their own piece of ground, protected by laws that apply equally to everyone regardless of what Karen thinks.